This conference will now be recorded.
Thank you.
Sorry, I couldn't get off mute. I am here.
Thank you. All right, I guess we'll get this meeting started, and Scott has an update for everybody in reference to the incident from yesterday.
All right, thank you, Lori. Okay, so yesterday at approximately 13:37, we became aware of a outage on the South Coast. The preliminary diagnosis of that outage was a conflict between the A and B sides of the South Coast, which was resulting in a battle for control between those two servers. That conflict resulted in PSAPs on the South Coast being unable to answer their calls in their PSAPs. However, EZNet contingency and overflow routing policies continued to function as expected, and calls were delivered to the North Coast PSAPs for those PSAPs who had implemented contingency and overflow policy through an MOA to a North Coast PSAP. The North Coast continued to function throughout the pendency of the event as expected. The South Coast PSAPs remained logged in on their workstations for the most part. They just weren't able to answer calls, but because they were logged in to the VESTA presented their calls to them first for answering. They weren't able to answer them, so it would be presented three times or for three ring cycles on one of their call paths, their voice paths. When that went unanswered, it would drop to a second, ring it three times, and then to a third voice path, ring it three times before it would then move it on to their overflow option one. At the first overflow PSAP, it would follow that same process. And it would ring three times on three lines before it would move it on to the second. Because for the most part, the first two options for overflow policy routing are South Coast PSAPs, they weren't able to answer the calls either. So that resulted in long ring times as it went through that process before it finally presented it into a North Coast. Those long ring times resulted in a large number of abandoned calls being created because people got tired of waiting for an answer. They hung up and they called back. EZNet continued to function exactly as it should have through that. It did exactly what it should have from what we've been able to determine so far. At this time, we don't know the root cause of this event. Text remained up for the vast majority of PSAPs throughout the event. You could text 911, but you couldn't get an answer to a call. We don't know the root cause at this point. We have requested a root cause analysis, and as soon as we get the results of that root cause analysis, we will update the PSAPs with that information and let everybody know what caused it and what we're going to do to try and mitigate it from ever happening again. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. Not a whole lot of information beyond what you all already knew, but I'd be happy to try and answer any questions that anybody might have.
Is someone
Okay.
talking? Is someone talking, Scott?
Well, I think there may have been somebody that was talking to someone else that wasn't on mute, but I'm not sure.
So, Scott, this is Randall. Are we aware of any anything that we can put in place to prevent something like this occurring in the near future until we get the full root cause analysis?
Well, I think until we know what caused it, it's impossible to mitigate it. We have to know what caused it before we can come up with any way to keep it from happening again.
Yeah, that makes sense. If nothing else, we could follow the breadcrumbs from yesterday and do something comparable to that. That might be a temporary fix.
Well, should we have anything happen again, we would follow the same procedure that we did yesterday, as far as making notifications and opening the bridge and trying to work through it to the extent we can. But short of that, I don't know what else we do.
That makes sense. Phil, do you have a perspective?
Well, certainly the ESINet routing rules, if the system is down, it's clear that that's a very important function of this 911 system platform, such that you for the PSAPs to know that if I lose my ability to take calls at this particular workstation and my PSAP, where are those calls going to be presented by the ESINet? If it goes to a neighboring jurisdiction and it's offline, it's going to take the next step going to others. And so I think it's a good exercise for all of us to study up where our ESINet routing rules or MOUs send the calls and make sure it works appropriately. And of course, another thing is to be real important in my mind is that if in fact you want a manual reroute to your admin lines, to make sure there are admin lines available at the dispatch positions to be able to answer the calls from an admin line, and test those from time to time just to make sure that the admin lines are functional and a handset is available for them. So I think this event sure sharpens our focus on alternative ways to pick up the calls if our workstations are not available. That's kind of my thought on that, Randall.
Yeah, that makes sense. Michelle, did you have an opportunity to work with any of the media?
I did, Randall. We reached out to the 3 main stations and spoke with those individually, as well as updated social media and tried to push it out that way. As far as communications goes, we also did send out notification to all PSAPs on the South Host, identifying what we understood the issue to be, as well as the mass notifications messages that Scott sent out. I do
Lori, go ahead.
I do want to say that a lot of the PSAPs implemented their emergency operations and notified their local users and sent out media messages to those same local stations, as well as putting it on their social media. So there was a very active and proactive response from the PSAPs on the South Host, getting it out to their local jurisdictions.
Excellent. Angie, I know you're responsible for the South, primarily responsible for the South Host. Were there any developments yesterday that is noteworthy?
Yeah, Randall, I think that we need to reevaluate our MOAs. It sounded like a lot of agencies were routed to some of the same PSAPs, and those PSAPs were overwhelmed by taking calls from 4 or 5 PSAPs at one time. So I think going forward, we may want to revisit that.
Good suggestion. Lori, anything from the North Host side that intrigues you?
Just the one thought that I had, which we ended up discussing on one of our calls, or one of our discussions that we were having back and forth, was I know it didn't really affect the North Host other than if they had those MOAs in place that they started receiving some of those phone calls, just to also let the North Host know that, hey, the South Host is down. You may be receiving some of these calls, and I don't think we got a hold of them until later in the event to let them know that this had occurred. So
a good perspective. Josh, I see you're on the call. Josh Michaelis, as the operations chairperson, do you have any observations based on what Scott, Phil, Angie, and Lori have shared?
No, I don't, but I would like to commend the two liaisons and Michelle. I think the added staff positions also made yesterday's outage go a little bit smoother, in my opinion, just because there was more hands on deck working the issue besides, Lori, Scott, and Phil. We now had two other council, contractors working the issue as well, which I thought was beneficial.
Thank you, Josh.
Josh, I see a question there about what are the odds that this could occur on the North Coast. Phil or Scott, can you answer that?
I'm sorry, Lori, I was distracted. What was the question?
Question there in the chat. This is, what are the odds this could occur on the North Coast?
I think that's extremely hard to say because we don't know what caused it on the South Coast. Until we know that, I don't think we can offer a valid opinion on the likelihood. I would say though that it happened on the South Coast yesterday and it didn't on the North. So I'm guessing that whatever caused the problem was some difference on the South Coast from the North. And that's kind of a part of the RCA is to determine what's different on the South that made it do this from the North.
In that regard, Scott, I'm thinking, I think you mentioned this earlier in your statement that we do have an all-team call this afternoon. And I think to answer Josh's concern on the North Host, one thing that will happen this afternoon is that all parties are going to be on the call, and that all parties, North and South, are going to be briefed on what we think happened, what we think we fixed, and so forth. So in that regard, I think there's going to be cross-fertilization between North and South this afternoon. In the unlikely event that it were to happen to the North Host, at least they're informed about the corrective action that we took yesterday. Is that plausible and make sense to you, Scott?
Certainly the first step, yes.
I had a question sent to me privately. I'm not going to say who it was or anything, but just to let everybody know, in case they're wondering how they get those notifications to join us on a bridge, a conference call, go into the 911 portal, the portal.kansas911.org, and then make sure you check those boxes that you want to receive that phone call, a text message, or and an email in the event of an outage or some kind of an issue with the system, because that's how we'll get a hold of you or somebody with your PSAP in case we can't call the PSAP. But that way you'll know that we've got something that we're working on, and if we don't have those checked in the portal, you won't get those notifications.
I think probably, Lori, a good segue from that is, I know that a lot of work has been done on databases here recently to ensure that we have the most accurate information. I think it was very helpful and timely that a deep dive was done the week before to ensure that we had the right point of contacts in the portal, and that our distribution lists were good. I think yesterday, when some of the notifications were sent out, we had very few bounce backs, which tells me that the data is good. But if you have changes within your center, please take a look inside the portal and any distribution list that you're on, and ensure that people that have left are removed, and that any new changes are noted there as well. But I think we have a really good product right now, because there's just very few that bounce back. And some of those were not because they were not valid. It was because their mailbox is full, or it was not being sent through for a reason. I mean, I think there was less than a handful.
Regarding that conference bridge, just another thought on that. That conference bridge, we encourage you all to join it whenever you see an event like this. I don't think we've ever had one open up on the South Coast before like this, but the fact that you join this bridge, put information in there, tell us what's happening in your world. If it's a common problem to everyone, the fact that you can get on the bridge, get information disseminated to you this way, and it cuts the time down for remediation. It takes the load off of the resolution center. They can focus on the specific problems. If there's some unusual thing that you're seeing at your center, you can share it on the bridge, but it's probably common to everyone. But I firmly believe without the use of this bridge that it would take longer to solve the problems. And so we appreciate all your quick input on this bridge to let us know what's happening in your world from a collective point of view. So we've never had a conference bridge that PSAPs could jump on like this during an event. I'm just glad that you're all using it, and it's such a powerful tool for us all. So thank you so much for that.
Hey, Lori, would this be an opportunity to talk about the Resolution Center and make sure everybody knows how to report trouble tickets?
Sure. I have that email somewhere here. 1 second. Probably,
well,
I'm just looking at who's on this call, and they probably mostly know that. But go ahead, Scott. Was that you?
It was me, Lori. This is Phil. But essentially, there's that resolution center number should be on everybody's computer terminal in the back room for AT&T. The resolution center, all they do is pick up calls from 911 centers. They don't do the commercial world at all. They only do 911 centers, that 1-866-722-3911 number. When you call them, to streamline the call, when you call them and tell them that you're, whatever county in Kansas, sometimes there are other counties that are in different states, so you got to always say in Kansas. They'll look up your information and take all your data down. They are not specifically the problem solvers themselves, but they gather all the information. They identify whether it's they triage the information. They identify whether it's a circuit issue, a computer issue, a host issue, or whatever, and then they'll get local Tiger Team, AT&T's Tiger Team support going to the field, or whomever the appropriate individuals are. So, and they'll always issue a trouble ticket, which it's really good if you write the trouble ticket down. It's a EY0, 4 other digits behind it. Take that ticket down, and that's your reference number for calling back in later on. In this particular event, they had, since it was a host, they had one master ticket that they knew was a host down. So that's one most of us were referring to. But anytime, if you would have called in, or any one of the PSAPs individually called in, they would have given an additional trouble ticket for your own center. And so that's kind of the process in general.
And as a follow-up to that, as soon as you get that trouble ticket from the res center, send an email to, stand by one, KSNG911 RESCENTER. So it's Kansas KSNG911 Res Center at googlegroups.com. If you always follow up your...
All right, but first you'll have to unlock your device.
Didn't like that. If you're reporting just routine trouble, we will not be aware of that unless you do that email to that Res Center email group. That lets us know anytime that you report trouble to the Res Center, so that if we start seeing several different PSAPs that are reporting similar trouble, we see that that's a systemic issue, and we can, take action from that. So always follow up any report to the Res Center with an email to that KSNG911 Res Center at googlegroups.com email address. And you can attach whatever you want to attach to that, be it screenshots or anti-alley data or anything that supports the trouble that you're reporting. Gives us a good base of information to work from in trying to troubleshoot and diagnose the problem.
And you should see that email up on the screen there with all that information on it.
Lori, is somebody talking?
Might just be some background, but I don't think anybody has anything.
What is one of the things that's particularly nice about that Google Groups email is that sometimes a picture is worth 1,000 words. If in fact you've got a screenshot that depicts the issue that you're dealing with, when you take a picture of that, typically with your camera or whatever, it'll grab. You take a picture of it such that it grabs the date, time, and whatever you're seeing. It's fantastic information for troubleshooting. It just gives so much more detail and ammunition for the techs or for us to look at for troubleshooting. So it's a very nice way to streamline the information passed in for problem resolution.
Okay, thanks everyone. Any more questions about the outage? I did see that Eric made the suggestion that, because of those MOUs with other PSAPs, that it would be good to make sure that they get that outage notification as well, to know that they're going to be getting some of those phone calls from the people that may be on the opposite host.
Lori, I see a question in the chat asking if anyone else is having anti-alley dropping the first number in an address when transferred into CAD, I think is what it's saying.
Michelle, that's a good question. And the question, I think that you're kind of going to, that question goes to the fact, what kind of CADs are you using? Because probably the anti-alley that drops to the CAD is a complete data package, but the CAD that's picking it up is probably truncating one character short of picking up the entire data stream. And so that would be probably as a parsing issue. And if you knew what type of CAD it was and if others had it, that would help identify if it's a universal CAD problem or just a one-off issue.
This is Josh. We've experienced that issue as well recently with the updates to that emergency number coming across, so that that number's there to be plotted within Rapid Deploy. and it is intermittent in a different CAD vendor for us, is that sometimes the caller's number will populate into that alley spill and sometimes it does not. It'll put like a period for us in that field.
Josh, if you ever get an example of that, that would be a perfect thing to take a screenshot of. I know you're always busy when you're taking a 911 call, but that would be great data to send in for a trouble ticket on it.
Phil, what I think I like about it is if you shoot the trouble ticket in, they're going to analyze it and let you know if it's a CAD issue, or they're going to do a deeper dive in it and let us know what direction to go from it.
Exactly, Michelle. And I broad brushed it to think it was only if it was an isolated event with one PSAP with one CAD, I would say it's parsing. But if multiple PSAPs have that issue, multiple CADs, then there's a systemic issue that probably needs to be looked at. If we had the data to look at it, it would be a lot easier to solve the problem.
Well, in my thought, it's, from my perspective early on, I think it's a CAD issue because most of our alley spills, they were used to getting that standard format of an alley dump coming over to CAD, and now that's been changed, if my understanding is correctly, with being on the EZNet. So I don't know how much, I don't necessarily, in my opinion, I don't feel like it's an AT&T or an anti-alley issue. I think it's a parsing issue with CAD and how it receives that data stream.
Josh, that would be where my mind would go. Well, but it's hard. But sometimes it's hard to tell now with the ESINet that data comes down in a different manner than it has historically. So we're all that information. If we can investigate it, we'd love to find conclusive information on it.
I agree with Josh. I think it is a parsing issue, but it may very well be a parsing issue on Motorola's part and what they're parsing out of the Petaflow and delivering to that alley format 96 that your CAD is looking for. So there's two different places that it's parsed, and could be either place where it's in error.
Okay, thanks everyone. Good discussion. Michelle, did you want to talk any about Rapid Deploy and their training academy?
I do. I know that when we rolled out Rapid Deploy training the last time, we had a lot of feedback on the delivery and the content of the training, and the both Rapid Deploy and the Kansas team really took an internal deep review of the delivery of training. In their name is the word rapid, and it's because they are quickly changing and adding features and functionality to our system, and I think we're going to see some of that next year. But with that, we also wanted to ensure that we provided the best tools for PSAPs for end users and administrators to be able to digest and use that technology to the best of their ability. Last week, we were able to look at a new solution that they're going to roll out next year. They're calling it the Rapid, I think it's the Rapid Deploy Training Academy. And I know the first thing everybody's going to say is, oh, just another place to go find training, but I think you'll find this valuable. Not only is it interactive and module based, but there's some questions and answers at the end of each module. It's visual, it's able to be stopped and started based on what environment you're in if you need to pause to take a call. So a dispatcher could be taking the training real time as they're working a console. But there's, like I said, there's tools added to it. It's very user friendly, and it's a good product, and it has all the supporting documentation at the end of each training, as well as the quiz and a certification that's provided to the trainee. It is something that'll be coming out next year and will be utilized in conjunction with the new features and functions that are coming out with the system. So we hope to have more information for you at the beginning of next year. We'll be working on setting up users for that, and I believe you will see a great enhancement and a value-added tool for the users and administrators of the systems as we move forward. So more information to come on that.
Michelle, any questions from anyone?
Michelle, it's my understanding that training is broke up into bite-sized pieces, so you could go back and review just if you had a question on something, you could go back and review just the portion on the question that you have. Is that accurate?
You know, that's accurate, and that's probably the concept of modules, is each module addresses a specific feature or function, and it is very user-friendly. Like if you need a refresher on something, just to go back and to get that content rather than needing to go through a 45-minute video or PowerPoint to find it. So you're exactly right. It's very user-friendly. You're able to go in and find specifically what you need the answer to. There's help files. There's not policy, but guidance documents on each one. They've tried to make it under a philosophy of relevant, retainable, and referenceable. And I believe that they've done a great job on that.
Thanks, everyone. Angie, do you have some topics for us?
Yeah, Lori, I was just going to ask everybody on the call a couple of questions. First being, how often does everybody want to have these calls? So the call today is intended for frontline staff, and we have that call right now every quarter. And going into 2021, we were thinking like every other month maybe would be a better fit so we could stay in touch more often. And then we have the director's call, which is every other week. And so what does this group think about changing the meetings to every other month?
Hey, I'm for it.
Thanks, Michelle. We talked earlier that it might just help us stay connected. So I think that in 2021, when we put out the meeting dates, we're going to schedule for every other month, and hopefully, you know, as many people can sign in as possible. The other question that I had, Michelle talked about a distribution list and, you know, emails and the portal. A lot of our directors are all set up to receive those messages, but our frontline staff aren't. And I wanted to know, there's quite a few supervisors on this call. How does everybody feel about Michelle, Lori, and I utilizing the rapid deploy email list for your staff to make sure that the messages get pushed out? We send them to a lot of the directors, like Michelle said, sometimes mailboxes are full, so on and so forth. Is it okay with the directors if we just send the invite directly to your staff, or is that something you prefer to do on your own?
I would prefer that you use our list for Rice County and send it to our entire staff.
Okay. I also see that that's mentioned in the chat as well. It's just our hope to increase communication, and if we can send the invite out and send, you know, one less thing that you guys as directors have to do, we don't mind doing that. As we continue to update our distribution list, we may be asking more from you guys about updated emails or whatnot. If you have Rapid Deploy, you have to have an email, but we've ran into the fact that some people have pretend email addresses or fake email addresses. So it hasn't been useful for us in that sense, but we do have, probably 700 or 800 emails for dispatchers around the state. And we think if we could just send them an invite and let them know about the meetings, that maybe we could get more people on the calls.
Well, and is this a good do the call? Should we do the call at a different time of day?
I know that it's hard as a telecommunicator to try to, and I know a few people have had to disconnect because of that, to be really managing a console as well as dialing in to a call like this. I would welcome if we wanted to change these to a different time so we could capture a different audience, but also the idea, I don't know how, when it comes down to what supervisors think, but you can log in or remote into these calls from anywhere. So even if it's not somebody directly at the console, but I think Lori has a valid question of how do we make this more user friendly for everybody in the PSAP. I hate to point anybody out, but I noticed that Chanute has two different call-ins, which I assume to be two different staff. How did you guys manage that today? Do you have frontline staff on the call? And if so, are they at the console, or how did you guys manage that? Chanute said they're listening in from the console. So that's awesome. Okay. We're both at consoles, Chanute said. That's great. Thank you guys for joining us and multitasking. What about some of you that do work the floor? Lori's question about changing the time. Do you see benefit of having this in the evenings so that a different shift can participate, or what do you guys think? Amber, your question about inviting others from the email groups we have, you mean just like other 911 professionals? Is that what you mean, Amber? Like other, like if you have surrounding, oh, there you go. I'm sorry, I have a Kansas. Yes, exactly. That's exactly who should be on these calls. And we have no problem with you forwarding the invite to them. So there's a lot of conversation in chat, and there's conversation about doing a rotation, maybe one call during the day and one call in the evening so that everybody can join. And I think that's a very creative idea, something to certainly consider. It seems like when we start talking the evening hours, or at least for our PSAP, it never seems to slow down until wee hours in the middle of the night. But what kind of hours are you guys thinking? And if it's easier to throw it in chat than to talk out loud, that's cool too.
I think as we develop this group and we engage more, it might be helpful to start sending the recordings out to our users on the North and South host so they can get an example of what we're talking about and the kind of agenda items that come up just on the fly, and how those are worked through. And I think as we go along, the group will get larger and interact more. I like the idea of rotating to get it available for shift work. One of the things that our partners in Kansas have asked us to do is to start creating a group of save calls or just really great calls that we can have a database of those and start sharing with others as as NINA and APCO move forward with the council's support of the spring endeavor of legislating 911 as first responders. I think that would be great to have as a resource, and it's going to come from our frontline dispatchers, those great calls that they take every day. But we need to be able to present those in an organized fashion. There's a steering committee that is taking a leadership role on legislation for this coming spring, and I can try to get you that information before the end of the call if any of you want to start sharing that data with them or those calls with them.
Does anybody out there have anything for us that you want to discuss? I didn't have any feedback for this call ahead of time. Feel free to throw any information in chat.
I would be curious. I noticed that Amber mentioned some regional roundtable discussions. I think every region has those. The Southeast hasn't been meeting, obviously, because of COVID. Is everybody on the call familiar with those types of local meetings? Is part one, and part two, Amber, what are you guys doing right now? Are you doing some online meetings like this, or have you guys just put them on hold? They can't see the chat. Amber says that their meetings are on hold, but they circulate a lot of information, like a distribution list throughout that group. We do the same in the Southeast. Again, every region has them. Typically, the PSAP directors are invited, the KHP, KCGIS, KBI, 911 Coordinating Council, Office of Emergency Communications, and any other guest. Just an opportunity to brainstorm locally on things that are impacting your PSAP and broaden your network. If you aren't aware of those meetings and you're interested, please reach out to one of us on the council and we'll make sure that you have the contact information for the person in your region. Amber had a question about the tips and tricks for the new EMD tablets. Does anybody have any guidance for her?
This is Josh. We have them. I sent her a message in private that anytime that I can give her a call, I can share what we've learned in Rice County. I don't know if there's anybody else on the call that is using those tablets from priority dispatch, but if you are, let me know and I'll be glad to share what we've been doing as well.
You guys, in hindsight, I was thinking about it, and maybe a better place to send our saves calls to, or just good calls to, is the 911 users group, because a good majority of those that are on the steering committee are also on that group. What do you guys feel about using that platform to send those calls for or through? There's an admin side and there's a user group side, and I don't know if one of those would be a better place to send those through.
I don't necessarily have any input on where to send them, Michelle. But your conversation about the user groups made me wonder if everybody on here knows that the user groups changed. They have a new address, and Dawn from Harvey County created a new distribution list. So if you don't know what those are, we can put those in the chat for you. But a lot of good information is shared that way.
I think that's a great idea. Do you have that readily handy that you can put that in the chat? So basically the process on that is if you send a request to be part of the users group, he confirms that you're actually a dispatcher in the state of Kansas, and then you'll get a confirmation that you've been added, like you confirm your email. And then you'll be part of the kind of like it's a 911 users group listserv, and you'll see questions going back and forth, best practices. Have you had this issue before? Do you have a policy for this that you might be willing to share? Or how do you guys handle that? They're kind of different based on what the address is that you're sending it to, whether it's more department head or end users, but both are very valuable assets moving forward. Thanks, Angie.
I'm going back to your question, Michelle, about where to share those. Would this be just an email, or do you think that there would ever be video or audio attached?
I could see where eventually there could be additional content added.
I was just wondering, I don't even know if this is possible, but would uploading something through the portal, or if we had some sort of like, you know, how they have like share groups or whatever, where you send them a link and then they dump their files in. I don't know if that would be an option or how big the files would be.
I think probably starting with these groups, and then as we grow, we can have some of those questions answered. I know we use a couple Google Drive options locally.
All right, well, I've got just a few minutes left. Anybody have anything else? Or? We'll look at some dates and send out then some new meetings for next year. In different times too, it looks like. All right, well, if nobody has anything else, I guess we'll give you back some time in your day. I know that's valuable. I can't seem to get enough of it in my day. So. Thanks everybody for joining. I'll get this video recorded, or this made into a video and get it out there to everybody.
Thank you, Lori.
Thank you all.
Thanks everyone.